Good afternoon, a blessed June 19th, which is the feast of the Holy Apostle Jude. That very illustrious apostle who was the brother of Christ and also the brother of James, the first bishop of Jerusalem, and also the namesake of that very famous hospital in Memphis, St. Jude's Children's Hospital. I'm making this video specifically because of the request of Father Philip Rogers, the priest of St. John's Orthodox Church in Memphis, Tennessee, where St. Jude's Hospital is. He's putting together a series on the fruit of the Spirit for his own parishioners. So I thought I would record mine for that community, but also post it to our own YouTube page at Saints Peter and Paul here in Topeka. St. Paul writes to the Galatians in the 5th chapter. He calls them to walk in the Spirit. Then he describes what it's like to walk in the Spirit. And he says the fruit of that walking in the Spirit, or the fruit of the Spirit, is, and he lists all these beautiful things: love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. And the one I'm going to focus on in this brief reflection is gentleness. And this word for gentleness can also get translated as meekness or humility. And there's a specific word for being of a humble state, or being humbled, or from humble circumstances, which is a different word. But this word for gentleness denotes aspects of humility and meekness. And I want to delve into that briefly here. So, this kind of gentleness, this humble and meek kind of gentleness, how do we understand what is being spoken of here? Well, St. Dorotheos of Gaza writes that there are two kinds of humility. One is putting oneself below everyone, and then there's the second, to attribute to God all virtuous actions. So anything that good occurs in your life that you are able to do, you ascribe that to God. That's the second form of humility. So the first is to put yourself below all others, which reminds us of Christ being the servant of all, that he emptied himself and became to serve and not be served. That's the first kind. And then the second is to attribute to God all the good that is occurring. All the virtuous things that you are able to do, you ascribe to God. These are, in a sense, two ways that we, in a sense, can become humble. And St. Dorotheus says that these two states of humility, or we could also call them gentleness and meekness, they come about naturally when we strive to keep the commandments. That it begins with an attempt for us, a trying to keep the commandments, and that the byproduct, the natural result of that, is these fruits of the Spirit, and this particularly being this gentleness or humility. And I want to read to you from the prologue of Ohrid that my own patron saint, St. Nikolai Velimirovich, wrote in the 20th century. And this is from earlier this month, on June 13th, in the section for consideration. He's going to explain a little bit, give us a picture of meekness and humility and gentleness in the life of St. Spiridon. He says, "Meekness and gentleness adorned the saints and gave them the strength and the motive not to return evil for evil. When the Emperor Constantius, St. Constantine's son, fell ill in Antioch, he summoned St. Spiridon to come and pray over him. In company with his deacon, Trifilius, St. Spiridon left Cyprus and arrived at the imperial court in Antioch and asked for admittance. St. Nikolai goes on to explain that St. Spiridon was not dressed very fancy, but rather poor, and he appeared to be a pauper in the eyes of one of the imperial servants that kept the gate. And so he says, at the emperor's court, one of the imperial servants, when St. Spiridon was trying to get in to see the emperor, taking him for a pauper, struck him a blow on one cheek. The meek and forgiving saint turned the other cheek to him. When he managed with great difficulty to reach the emperor, he placed his hand on Constantius's head, and the emperor immediately recovered. So we see here in the life of St. Spiridon that gentleness and meekness and humility is expressed in not returning evil for evil, in turning the other cheek, which is what Christ calls us to do. And that this gentleness naturally will flow out of us as we strive to keep the commandments, that we will naturally not return evil for evil. And this used to be how we, even in pop culture, depicted our heroes, or our heroes behaved. Not so long ago, even in silly children's cartoons, you had this character called He-Man back in the mid-'80s. And I remember I've been letting my kids see some of these cartoons, and it reminded me of what a distinct character this cartoon was. You never see He-Man get angry. Even as he's fighting his enemy who's trying to harm him, you never really see him strike his enemy. Only interaction he has with his enemy sometimes is that he'll pick him up, restrain him, or kind of toss him. And his enemy is never hurt. In many cases, he's the one saving his enemy from destruction or death. And he's always laughing. This was, in a sense, this is a gentle form of power, of strength in this silly cartoon. And this used to be how Superman was betrayed before he became too serious. He always was defeating his enemy without really hurting his enemy, and restraining evil without harming the one doing evil. This was the character of in a sense, the old superheroes, which we've lost in many ways. And we need to revisit and relearn, because this is the true, in a sense, expression of Christian strength. It is not wrong to restrain evil, but we try and strive to restrain evil without doing evil. The gentle manner in which we keep order is with a gentle hand but a strong hand, to restrain evil but not to do evil. And I think if we meditate on this kind of gentleness, of not returning evil for evil, it'll profit us greatly in this day we live in, with so much upheaval, and where we've lost, in a sense, the gentle strength of our heroes. God bless you all.